saying yes to yourself isn't about you. It's about the lives that you touch.
Welcome to Agency for Change, a podcast from KidGlov that brings you the stories of changemakers who are actively working to improve our communities. In every episode, we'll meet with people who are making a lasting impact in the places we call home.
Hey everyone, this is Lynn Weinman, President and Chief Strategist at KidGlov. Welcome to another episode of the Agency for Change podcast. Today's guest is Abby Havermann, coach, speaker, and author, authenticity enthusiast, and seeker of truth. Abby works with both individuals and organizations, but her specialty, and I know this firsthand, is moving high achievers from the hot mess express to harmonious, aligned action. Along the way, she teaches clients how to stop proving their worth and start owning it. Abby, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm so excited to be here.
I am really looking forward to this conversation, and I want to jump right in because I have said out loud that one of my bucket list goals is to do a TED Talk, and you have done it. And I think a lot of people learned about you by first listening to that TED Talk. Women's liberation is an inside job, ending self-betrayal. And you talk about some personal experiences in there. Can you share your story related to that podcast and the lessons you learned?
Yes, that podcast germinated almost 2 decades ago, really that story. And I was a couples therapist. I was married to a relapsing addictions counselor, and I was arrested for domestic violence.
Oh my goodness.
And they heavily edited that TEDx. So the whole story really didn't get out, which was kind of a bummer. But the crux of it really was that we had a scuffle, which was very uncharacteristic. He was completely out of it. He shoved me. I slapped him. I was leaving him the next day. And so he called 911.
Oh.
And what I did not understand is that there's a mandatory arrest law in Colorado. And back then, I was much more concerned with what the neighbors were going to think.
Yeah.
Wanting to protect him. I didn't want him to go to jail. And so I answered their questions as, women often do. And certainly as a psychotherapist, I always was taking responsibility for my part in things.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he was telling them a whole different story, and they had to arrest somebody, and they arrested me. And
Whoa.
I had to spend the night in jail.
Whoa.
Because they didn't, they couldn't process the paperwork soon enough or whatever. And it was that long, dark night of the soul that I had this awakening. Because of course, I started like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. I've got so much things to do. I've got to pack. I can't believe this is happening. These cops.
Of
blah, blah,
course,
blah.
you're going through your
Right?
to-do list at this dark hour. Yes.
Of course, yeah. Because I was in real denial about what this all meant. I'm like, oh, this is just another ridiculous escapade from living with someone with an addiction, What I realized, because I was aggravated at him and at the cops and all these things, and through this night, this very long night, all of a sudden, I really came to understand what my own culpability in landing myself there for the night was. And it had to do with a lot of self-betrayals, not just on that day of covering for him instead of protecting myself and my 2-year-old, for that matter, who wound up for a night with him when he was under the influence, but going way back to even marrying him to begin with.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to marry him. I really began this journey of excavating and self-discovery and understanding, where do I need to take responsibility for where I am betraying myself and how that is landing me literally and figuratively in jail.
Oh my goodness, Abby. So many things in what you just said there. And I'm going to just ask you a follow-up question on that, because so much of what you said I relate to. I have not spent a night in jail yet, but who knows? Maybe that should also be on the bucket list. It would be interesting. I hope
It was.
I hope my mother's not listening to this. If you know my mother, please don't tell her I said that. But why do we as women betray, or maybe we start with humans and go to women. Why do we as humans and women betray ourselves in such ways?
Yeah, I really think it goes down to worthiness issues. And that's really what my TED Talk was about, essentially. And it has to do with our conditioning. We betray ourselves because we are on automatic programs going through our lives. And that's just how we have evolved. If you think about when you get up in the morning and you're making coffee and you're tying your shoes and you're grabbing your keys and you're doing all the things, you're not really fully conscious of that. If I asked you to walk through, like, what were you thinking or doing all this stuff this morning, you couldn't tell me because your body knows how to do all of those things without you having to engage your mind in it. The problem is that when we also behave that way with our thoughts and our emotions, and so we memorize these states of being. And when we do that, for example, we're so comfortable and used to feeling, let's say, guilty, that the feeling of guilt comes up and we automatically do the thing that we've practiced doing when we feel guilty, which is in many cases, all the things. We just say, oh, I feel guilty, so I'm going to do this for this person. When we do that, that is a self-betrayal, because unless we're doing that with consciousness, with saying, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do, because I have the bandwidth to do this, because it feels good to me to do this, then we're self-betraying. We're doing it because I'm going to feel guilty if I don't. We're doing it to avoid bad feelings. And that is a self-betrayal that can lead to burnout, resentment, all of these things that drain us and, frankly, make us sick.
Yeah. And Abby, I know you work with a lot of women, and I'm just going to come right out and tell everyone you've worked with me for several months now, and I so appreciate the work we've done. Why do you think we do these things and we get so far down the rabbit hole that it feels like we can't get out? You can't see the top of the hole anymore.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, because we're in these automatic programs, it's really very subconscious. We're only thinking consciously with 5% of our brain. And so we have an idea like, oh, I want to make this change in my life. But 95% of who we are is this subconscious set of programming of unconscious thoughts and beliefs about ourselves. And that's really what's driving us. And what happens with high achieving people is that we've gotten to where we are based on certain behaviors and thoughts and beliefs. And sadly, for a lot of high achieving people, those have to do with also a lot of self-flagellation and keep driving, because if you don't, you're not worthy. If you don't fix this, you're not worthy, unconsciously. And the problem is that life leads to feeling like you're at the bottom of the pile. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, you can't see the forest through the trees. And this idea that all of the really wonderful qualities that got you to where you are not the ones that are going to get you to where you're going is really hard to swallow, because you feel like, but no, if I let go of all of these things, then I'm going to lose everything. And then you've got to come up against yourself. And as humans, we don't like to do that. Our bodies don't like to feel uncomfortable. We don't like to come up against ourselves. And that's really what my work is about, is coming up against yourself.
Yeah. So Abby, as somebody's in that cycle, and they're in that cycle of self-sabotage, could you explain what are some of the signs or triggers that we might see, and how can someone start addressing them? If they're like, I feel like I'm at the bottom of the pile at this moment, what are the signs and how do you start to address them?
Well, a lot of times I will talk to people and they'll say, oh, this is the last thing I feel like doing. And they'll tell me that like while they're getting in the car to go do it. That's a sign.
Yes, that's right. I've been there so many times. Yes.
Yeah, that's a sign that you are betraying yourself. You have to stop and ask yourself that question. If you are feeling resentful, resentment is a wonderful clue. When you're feeling resentful, it's because you said yes when you meant no somewhere. and there was a reason that you did it, and you're telling yourself that you did it because, well, I have to, this, I don't have any other choices. If I don't, this will happen. Or this is one of my favorite. It's the right thing to do.
Yes.
I was like, what if what the right thing to do is actually the complete wrong thing to do? Because when we say it's the right thing to do, or I have to, what that means is if I don't do it, I'm going to have some really uncomfortable feelings because maybe people will be upset with me, or maybe I'll feel selfish. And God knows nobody likes to feel selfish. And that's all we're saying. I'm going to come up against those feelings if I don't do it. But we have a lot of excuses about why we have to do it. So those are all signs, right, that you are about to self-betray. And the way to unwind that is to stop and to look at your inner world and figure out what is driving my behavior right now without any judgment, right? I'm a bad person if I don't do this. I'm a good person if I do this. I'm selfish. I'm all these things. So-and-so is going to be upset with this. I'm imperfect if that. None of that. That's just noise. But really looking at, what is my motive here? Am I doing this because I feel guilty? Because if I am, then I'm likely going to feel resentful afterwards.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, but
I mean, I could talk for so long on it,
yeah. But
yes.
I'm going to ask you a question that actually you and I have talked about extensively in your sessions and helping me. It feels like we've all grown up with these mantras, right? We have these mantras: no pain, no gain, fake it till you make it. If your ship doesn't come in, swim out to it, right? Like, I feel like there's so much conditioning out there to convince us that the journey has to be painful, that if it's not painful, we're not doing it right. And that makes it so hard to decide, am I really feeling guilty here, or am I just working hard, right? Do you hear that all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. And but honestly, I hear it when someone even gets to a certain level, because you have to have a certain amount of curiosity to even get there.
Yeah.
You have to really have peeled away some layers of the onion to even ask yourself that question, because most people out in the world aren't even asking that question, right? They're just, oh, I have to, there's no choice. This is the only thing, and they don't see where they're betraying themselves. And so I love that question, because it means that I've got a fish on the hook, like someone's interested in themselves, and now I can work. Now we can really dig in and see what's going on in there, right? And it takes time to figure that out, because we are habituated into ignoring our intuitions. And I talk about this actually in the TED Talk. I retell the story of Little Red Riding Hood. And my belief that really that never would have happened if she had just listened to her intuition, because she knew that she didn't trust this guy, because she kept asking questions. And yet every time she asked the question, she kept moving closer, right? So how do we know when it's like, well, it's the right thing to do, or when it's making me anxious? And it takes some time, right? Like it takes some presence. It takes some practices and an interest in really getting to the bottom of, wait a minute, I need to take a beat and really figure this out. And sometimes that means we have to close our eyes and we have to really block out the stimulus. And what would this be like if no one were in my ear about this, including myself, including if I didn't have this thing that I've got to have this TED Talk or I'm going to not be doing anything. Or if I don't do this by the time I'm this age, then I'm nobody. And really say, okay, let's put all of that aside. Do I have the bandwidth for this right now?
Yeah.
How am I going to feel if I do this, if I don't do this? And ask ourselves some hard questions.
Yeah. Abby, do you find that people kind of want the quick fix? Like, Abby, can you just give me the 5 techniques to make me feel better and I'll be done? Like, right? Do you have a list or a book or something? And I can just quickly read it and understand the things and be great.
I think you would have liked that, right?
I would
when
like
you first
that.
started, you would have been like, let's do this. Can we stop? Right?
That is why I asked the question, because I'm thinking back to when you and I first started. I'm like, okay, tell me how to do this. All right, I can do that. I'm going to be fine now. And then it's like, Oh, no, no. We still have some hard, deep work to do. Yeah. It's kind of like
Yeah. And
marathon training, right? You
it
can't
is.
train
And
for a
you,
marathon in one day by reading a Google article.
no, no. And we have a myth that we really think we know ourselves. And really, what we call ourselves is really just our personality, which is a collection of parts. But if you think about it, you feel differently based on what's happening in your world at any point in time. You have one part that wants to get healthy, and you have another part that wants to eat the chocolate cake. So
Yeah.
there's constantly different parts arguing with itself, right? And there's a lot to unpack. Our minds are incredibly, incredibly complex. So this idea that we can outsmart ourselves in one, two, three. I used to say that when I was a therapist too. Like, some therapists like, oh, I've got a 1, 2, 3 process, and it's like baking a Betty Crocker cake. No, it is not. Not if you really want to see real change. And the reason is because we're hardwired. If you think
Yeah.
about tying your shoe, you learned how to tie your shoe several times with practice. You practiced it. Well, guess what? You've been practicing feeling guilty. You've been practicing feeling weight of the world's on your shoulders. You've been practicing taking care of everyone and everything for decades. It's wired into you. You have to unwire that, and it does take a little bit of time.
Yeah, yeah. So Abby, one thing I know about you is you like to talk about the elephant in the room. And I'm curious about what is your, if you'll share it with us, what is your technique for getting past small talk and to the heart of the matter?
Well, I mean, first of all, I don't, not everybody wants to get past small talk, and I don't knock that, right? Like, we need all kinds of people in this world. Like, I'm way too much for a lot of people, right? So if someone isn't,
That's why we love each
wanting
other,
to,
Abby.
yeah, right. You and I, we are a lot, right? But if people don't want to get past small talk, I don't know, we don't need to do that. But if you're asking about like when I'm working with someone in particular, because there's sort of two different answers, right? Like in social settings, I'm going to kind of test the waters,
Yeah.
and sharing who I am, and the topics that I want to talk about is really just a pretty way, a disarming way of getting people to see that it's okay to share that's what I'm interested in. But when I'm working with someone, sometimes people come and there's a lot of things that are hard to talk about, things they haven't talked about in a long time. And one of the techniques that is really great is you just take a step back from what you're actually talking about, and you talk about why it's difficult to talk about that. Because that's what's most important. If somebody's having trouble talking about something, this is getting in their way in all areas. They're resisting. There's a resisting force, and we are made of energy. And if we are resisting something, it's going to come back at us. So when people are upset about something that's happening in their external world, but they're unable to talk about what's happening because it's so uncomfortable to them, they are throwing energy at that. Resistance is energy. And so they're going to see more of that uncomfortable thing. So a lot of the times what we talk about is the defense mechanisms that are happening right there. And this is an old therapy technique around just saying, okay, well, let's talk about what it is that's difficult to talk about this. And then when they can identify that and they can disarm, they can quiet down those defense mechanisms, and we can get their body relaxed, then it's like, okay, they're more settled into their authentic selves. They're more settled into their sage brain. They're more able to talk about those things because their body doesn't feel like it's being chased by a lion anymore.
Yeah. Abby, even just the way you said that, I felt you employing those techniques. Like I felt myself feeling more calm as you were using your calming therapy voice. So it really does work, even when you're recording podcasts. So one of the things you worked on with me is a system called PQ, or positive intelligence. Can you tell us a little bit more about this approach and how it complements the group coaching and mastermind and individual coaching that you're doing?
Yeah, so PQ is actually something that I added to my arsenal relatively recently. And what I love about it is that it's great for people who are advanced in this work and people who are complete novices. It brings all of the study of neuroscience that I've done down to very, very simple ways of understanding it. And it's basically mental fitness. And mental fitness, you think about the same way you think about physical fitness. So if you go into a gym, you're not going to pick up a 150-pound weight the second you
Yeah.
start, right? It's going to be small and you're going to build. And that's the same way that we're working with training your mind. What PQ, Shirzad Shamin is the founder of that, what he found through researching research in neuroscience, performance science, positive psychology, and cognitive behavioral psychology is that in order to go through life with more positivity and less stress and anxiety, you need to grow three mental fitness muscles. The first is your saboteur interceptor. You have to be able to interrupt that voice in your head that is constantly judging you, judging other people, and judging the circumstances in your life. The second is you have to be able to increase your sage muscle. That's the part of the brain where empathy lives, collaboration, communication, creativity, right center functions, right? That's when the analytic mind is calmed down and the right center is more open. And then finally, you have to grow your self-command muscle, which is the ability to move and shift from a state of stress to a state of flow more often. It's an operating system that whenever I start with someone individually, I run them through a group. And then I also teach the group as a separate thing as well. And when you can lay down that operating system and people learn a way of settling themselves down,
Yeah.
now now you can do some work, because if your body thinks it's being chased by a lion, you can't think straight. You can't, you're gonna circle an analytic dream. Should I do this? Should I do that? What's the pros and cons? Da, 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 da. What do you think? What do we think? Da, da, da. I can't believe this is happening. You're in this whole, cycle. And you physically can't, you physiologically can't get out of it.
Yeah.
So learning this is absolutely key. And what Shirzad found is that it takes 15 minutes of practice a day, not even all at once, with an app on your phone, and you will see a difference in your brain centers. So people who, meditate for hours like I do, and people who have never done anything at all, it's a wonderful way to get your arms around like the number one thing that's going to improve your performance, your health and wellness, and your relationships.
Yeah, because we can't call you every time we need someone to calm us down. We have to learn to do that ourselves. Abby, could you just give us a high level overview of the work that you do? And then I want to talk a little bit more specifically about a new program that you're launching. But can we just start high level? What are all the things that you do to employ these principles and help different people?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can call me every time you need to calm down if you're engaged
Okay.
in working with me, because that's how my model works, right? I'm more of a concierge coach. And so when I'm working one-on-one with people, there we have anchor sessions throughout the month, but then I'm also on speed dial, right? And I'm also running people through that positive intelligence class. And so what I'm really doing is helping people rewire,
Yeah.
helping them rewire out of the habits and self-betrayals that have gotten them into, subpar positions in their lives, and to places where they're getting more of the results that they want. And at a high level, really, most people are driven by the circumstances in their external world. We all are. We all are. And that's okay, because that's how we've evolved. But the question is, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
Because we can't control what's happening in our external world. And I heard this wonderful quote the other day, and I wish I had said it myself. If I'm not the problem, then there is no solution.
Mm,
And that's really the message, because that's empowerment. That is empowerment.
yeah.
And so do that one-on-one with people, helping them with whatever they're overcoming in their life. That's going to be the answer. Finding that inner tranquility, getting into that right center of the brain where intuitively they already have everything they need to know to move forward. I love speaking on stages and I love speaking to audiences because, and I hate the term motivational speaker. I can't stand that, because I don't have an interest in motivating people, because I don't know about you, Lynn, but I can be motivated on Thursday and on Friday. I'm sitting around watching TV. Motivating is not, it's cheap, right?
Yeah.
But what I like to do is really shift a perspective, have an audience have like an aha that you can't unknow. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. And it launches you into what I call awakened, aligned action.
Oh,
And that's what I'm looking to do, whether I am speaking to an audience, whether I'm working individually or coaching people as a group.
awakened, aligned,
Aligned
action.
action.
That sounds amazing. The triple A's of all of this work, Abby. With your name, it's the quadruple A. So,
Right,
hey,
right.
let's talk more about From Hot Mess to Harmony, the online challenge that you're launching. Honestly, it sounds like fun. Can you give us a sneak peek?
Yeah, so I did this challenge right after I launched my TED Talk, and it was a ton of fun. I did it live, and people got a ton out of it, and I had an absolute blast. And it was 4 nights, and so I decided to record it separately. But the 3 pillars of getting from hot mess to harmony is awaken, align, and act. Right,
Okay.
and so what I did in this challenge is I took some segments out of each piece of that. It's a longer course that I'm building. And I took 4 segments out of that and put them together in a challenge. And so the awaken part really is about this unconscious conditioning, the way we are conditioned. For example, as women, we've been conditioned since the dawn of time to base our worth on external measures, from our dowry to our waistline to how well we can bring home the bacon and fry it in a pan. We've practiced that. It's just
Yeah.
automatic. We don't even realize we're doing it. So understanding the conditioning we've been through and the consciousness, and then an exercise to help you, what I call wake up, which is
Yeah.
how Gurdjieff used to talk about it. A wake up. We are asleep as humans. We're sleeping. And then align. I pulled a segment out of align for this challenge, which is your primary purpose. And when I talk about your primary purpose, I don't mean, like you work on branding and you help people really figure out like what's their global purpose. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about that. I'm talking about like, what's your purpose in any given moment? So a lot of times people will have a primary purpose of having a day with the family, but they end up going into the office or being distracted all day. And we do that because we're on this automatic program because like, oh, but I'm worthy if I do this and I've got to get this done. And I need to do that because no one else will do it. And we just
Yeah.
go through that. And it's like all of a sudden, what happened to your primary purpose? I go through a lesson on that, which is a really fun one where people figure out what their primary purpose is and how to figure that out in any interaction they're having. If it's a conflict, if they're responding to an email, if it's going into a dinner party, whatever it is. And then we do one on motive, which is also tough to swallow, but it's a really good one. I mean, from working with me, it's not always for the faint of heart.
Yeah. Right.
I work with tough
You're not
people who are
gonna
tough.
you're not gonna achieve the triple A's if you don't tackle the tough work.
Right. Right. So I like to hold a container of compassion, but really challenge. And so understanding your motives, and we all have different motives, right? Whether we want to believe it or not, we all sometimes are doing things because we want appreciation or because we want validation. Teach people in that how to really uncover their motive. And the reason this is really important that we look at motives isn't because we'll be a better person or because other people will like us more. My reason to help people really uncover their motive is because you will like yourself more. If you're really clear on what your motive is for doing something, you have less anxiety. You sleep better. You don't have a backlash. And so that's a really important one. And then finally, we do a module on self care, which is also one of my favorite things to talk about, the bill of goods we've been sold about self-care and why it is constantly sabotaging us because we think we're doing it right and we're still a hot mess. And then we're told, why are you a hot mess? You just got a massage. And then we beat ourselves up more. And it's just a
What a
cycle. And so I
cycle.
teach
Yeah.
you, what real self-care is. Yeah.
That's awesome, Abby.
So
I
that's the
love it.
challenge. Yeah.
I love it. And I know this is part of a whole new website launch for you too. Can you tell us more about the website launch? I know we have a lot of marketing people listening.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I don't think I understood how important the work that you do, Lynn, is. Like, I mean,
Thanks for
I
saying that.
know it. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I know it. But like going through this process, there's only one way to explain the way that I feel. And I keep saying it. I keep saying it because we just did a mini launch today. We'll keep working on it and developing it more. But I feel like the Velveteen Rabbit. Do you know the
Ah,
Velveteen Rabbit?
yeah. But
That
tell us
story?
how. Yeah.
The story of the stuffed animal who was loved so much it became real.
You're real.
And
Yeah.
that is exactly what having branding, I think, really brings to the table. It's like,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm real all of a sudden because, as you know, and as much as I want to deny it, it's the way that you put yourself out in the world
Absolutely.
that, and for decades, I mean, people always tell me, well, you shouldn't share so much about your personal life because, people will think this and I'm always like, I don't care. Like that's to me, it's about connection. It's about finding meaning. People won't think you're an expert. Well, okay, then those people won't work with me.
You
But the
can't
truth of it,
handle the whole world, Abby. You have to have
right,
the right ones, right? That's what branding is, also a selective process. Helps people identify who should work with you.
exactly, right. And so you're not getting all the people that are less interesting to work with, and the people that aren't interested, you're not aligned with, and that you can't help as well as someone else could help them. So it's been really, really great to just see myself reflected and my business reflected with colors and logos and things I've been saying and pictures. And it's tremendous. I really can't. I mean, what fun that you get to do that for people and with people and do it so well,
Mm.
that people can feel that way is unbelievable.
I'm so happy for you because I do have to say that's the most fulfilling part of the work is when you see an individual or an organization with a new brand, it's almost like setting them free. It's like, I can't wait to see how the world opens up to you with this new frame and way of presenting yourself. So I'm really excited. We'll get a link to that website in the show notes for anybody who wants to go on and click to it. So, Abby, I'm going to ask you my favorite question next because I am so lucky on this podcast to get to speak with so many interesting people. I would really like an original Abby Havermann quote to share with our listeners.
Just one, huh?
Oh, well, hey, I'm down. I'll take the bonus quotes too. I love that you yourself are definitely an overachiever.
Right. Well, okay. So here's a couple of my favorites. Stop proving your worth and start owning it.
Oh, yeah. Such a good one.
Shift the focus from what you're doing to who you're being.
Mm.
That's a big one for me. And then my last one that I always like to impress is saying yes to yourself isn't about you. It's about the lives that you touch.
Whoa. You know what? That is so good for every person who feels like I can't say yes to myself because I've been told that was selfish or people will think badly of me. That's 100%. Wow. Pure gold 3 times over there. Thank you for that. So, Abby, for our listeners who'd like to learn more about you, get to that new website, see your TED Talk. Of course, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes, but do you want to tell people what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, I mean, on my website at www.abbyhaverman.com, you'll have all the different ways to get in touch with me. People are always free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, email me. I'm not on social media a whole ton. I know I
Probably
should
a
be.
good, no, I don't think so
I
necessarily.
I
Yeah.
go in and out with it. I go in and out with it. But yeah, my website is really the best place to reach out, get my email, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, Abby, what a great conversation. I feel lucky to have the chance to work with you. As we wrap up this time together today, what is the most important thing you would like our listeners to remember about the work that you're doing?
When you get your inner world sorted, your outer world will fall into place. There's a way for you to not just look confident, but to feel confident. There's a way for you to actually do less and achieve more.
Wow.
I want people to understand that and that they're not alone.
Abby, I feel like we could do a whole podcast just talking about that, right? Because most of us think it's the reverse. Once I get the outside figured out, the inside will fall into place. And it's just the opposite.
It is the opposite. It is the opposite. Pain in life it happens, but suffering is optional.
Mm,
And that's what this teaches you.
so good. Abby, my friend, I fully feel like the world needs more people like you. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Lynn. It's wonderful to have you in my life.
We hope you enjoyed today's Agency for Change podcast. To hear all our interviews with those who are making a positive change in our communities, or to nominate a changemaker you'd love to hear from, visit KidGlov.com at KIDGLOV.com to get in touch. As always, if you like what you've heard today, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.